I should have been afraid when I turned around in that parking lot and saw him still there, 3 steps behind me, hands in his pockets, watching. But I wasn't. Maybe I was too tired to care. Maybe I'd been alone so long that even a stranger's presence felt like something. He was white, bald, covered in tattoos that crawled up his neck like stories he'd never tell. His hands were scarred when he picked up my groceries, but they were careful, gentler than any man who'd touched me in years. When he said, "You're carrying too much," I should have said no. I should have walked away. Instead, I let him follow me home. I didn't know he'd been released from prison 4 months ago. I didn't know that letting him carry my bags would change everything. But when he set them down at my door and said, "You shouldn't be alone like this," I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. You will feel so many emotions in this story of second chances and forbidden love. Please support us by clicking subscribe to the channel. I wasn't paying attention that Tuesday evening at Morrison's Market on 5th Street. I was exhausted. Double shifts at the diner were killing me. Rent was 3 days late, and my phone kept buzzing with texts from my ex that I kept deleting without reading. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making everything look sickly and pale, including me in the reflection of the freezer case. I had my list crumpled in one hand, my canvas bags in the other, and absolutely zero awareness of my surroundings, which is why I didn't see him until I walked straight into his chest. The collision sent my bags flying. Apples rolled everywhere across the scuffed linoleum floor, scattering between aisles like they were trying to escape. I stumbled backward, mortified, already apologizing. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking, I'm such a mess," and dropped to my knees to gather everything. He knelt too. That's when I saw his hands first, scarred knuckles, thick fingers with calluses that spoke of hard labor, tattoos disappearing under his sleeves, dark ink, detailed work, the kind that takes hours and money and commitment. We both reached for the same apple, and our fingers touched. I looked up. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s. White guy, completely bald, with tattoos creeping up his neck, numbers, symbols, things I didn't understand but that made my stomach tighten with recognition of something I couldn't name. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they held mine for a second too long. Not threatening, not flirting, just seeing me, really seeing me, in a way that felt like he understood exactly how tired I was, how close to breaking, how invisible I'd become. He didn't smile, didn't make small talk. Just handed me the apple and started gathering the rest of my groceries without asking if I needed help. His movements were efficient, controlled, like someone who'd learned to make himself useful without taking up space. He placed each item carefully back in my bags, the bread on top so it wouldn't get crushed, the eggs positioned safely, the canned goods at the bottom. "Thank you," I said, standing up, trying to read his face. "Really? I'm sorry for crashing into you." He stood too, and that's when I realized how tall he was. Broad-shouldered, solid, dressed in a plain gray t-shirt and worn jeans. He nodded once, a slight dip of his chin, and stepped back to give me space. I turned to finish shopping, weirdly flustered, trying to shake off the strange intensity of that moment. But as I moved through the store, grabbing the last few things on my list, I kept seeing him. One aisle over, near the dairy case. At the end of the bread aisle, not following exactly, but there, always there, in my peripheral vision. At the register, he was 3 people behind me. I paid for my groceries, fumbled with my bags, and headed out into the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt, and the November air had that bite that meant winter was coming. I made it halfway to the bus stop when I heard footsteps behind me. Not running, not rushing, just steady, keeping pace. I stopped and turned around. He was there, 3 steps back, hands in his pockets now, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Are you following me?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but my heart was pounding. This was it. The moment where the helpful stranger becomes something else. He didn't deny it, didn't pretend, just said in a low, rough voice, "You're carrying too much, and it's getting dark." I should have told him to leave. Should have pulled out my phone, threatened to call the police, done any of the things women are supposed to do when strange men follow them. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he said it. Not like a threat, but like a fact. Like he'd assessed the situation and decided I needed protection whether I asked for it or not. "I can manage," I said, but my voice wavered. He stepped forward, just one step, and held out his hands for my bags. Which way? Every instinct screamed danger. Every rule I'd ever learned about safety said run. But when I looked at him standing there in the fading light, covered in tattoos that probably meant things I couldn't imagine, I saw something else. Something in the careful way he'd picked up my apples. Something in the distance he maintained, giving me space to choose. I pointed west toward my apartment building 6 blocks away. He took my bags without another word and started walking, and I followed him. We walked in silence through the cooling evening. He stayed slightly ahead, carrying my groceries like they weighed nothing, never looking back to check if I was still there. He seemed to know instinctively how to move. Not too fast, not crowding me, just present, solid, there. When we reached my building, a tired 3-story brick structure with a broken intercom and a front door that never quite locked, he set my bags down carefully on the steps and backed away immediately, putting space between us. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. He nodded, started to turn, then stopped and looked back at me, something shifting in those dark eyes. "You shouldn't be alone like this," he said quietly. "Out here. This late. Carrying everything yourself." Before I could respond, he walked away, hands back in his pockets, disappearing around the corner into the November darkness. I stood there on the steps with my groceries, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't name, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. He started appearing everywhere, not obviously, not threateningly, just there. The next morning, I left for my early shift at the diner at 5:30 a.m., and he was leaning against the wall across the street, coffee in hand, watching my building. When he saw me, he nodded once and walked away in the opposite direction, like he'd just been checking, making sure. That afternoon, when I got off the bus 3 blocks from work, he was at the corner, hands in his jacket pockets. Didn't approach, didn't speak, just watched me walk past, and then I heard his footsteps behind me until I was safely inside the diner. By the 3rd day, I should have been scared. Should have called the police, gotten a restraining order, done something. But I wasn't scared. Not exactly. Because every time I saw him, every time he appeared in my periphery, I felt something closer to relief than fear. He never got close, never tried to talk to me, just existed in this protective orbit around my life, like a satellite I hadn't asked for but was starting to depend on. Friday night, everything changed. I was coming home from a double shift at nearly midnight, so exhausted I could barely think. My key stuck in the apartment lock. It had been sticking for weeks. But my landlord never fixed anything and I couldn't afford to move. I jiggled it, cursed, tried again. The hallway was dark. The bulb burned out weeks ago, and I was alone. Except I wasn't. "It's the pins," a voice said behind me, and I jumped, spinning around. He was there at the top of the stairs, a small leather pouch in his hand. "Lock's old, pins stick. You've been forcing it. That makes it worse." My heart hammered. "How long have you been watching me?" "Long enough to know you need a new lock." He moved closer, slowly, giving me time to tell him to stop. When I didn't, he knelt in front of my door and opened the leather pouch. Lockpicks. Actual lockpicks. I should have run. Instead, I watched as he worked on my lock with careful, practiced movements. His tattooed fingers were surprisingly delicate, adjusting things I couldn't see. 30 seconds later, my door opened smoothly. "I can fix it properly," he said, standing up. "Tomorrow, if you want." "Who are you?" I asked. "Derek." He started down the stairs, then paused. "You should get a deadbolt too. This lock wouldn't stop anyone who wanted in." He was gone before I could respond. The next morning, he showed up at 9 a.m. with tools and a new lock from the hardware store. He installed it without asking permission, refusing payment, working in efficient silence while I made coffee and pretended this was normal. Pretended I didn't notice the prison-style tattoos covering his arms, the kind with too much detail and too much meaning. Pretended I didn't see the way he moved like someone who'd learned to be useful without being noticed. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked, handing him coffee. He tested the new lock, making sure it turned smoothly. "Because nobody else is." That should have been creepy. Should have sent me running. But it wasn't. It was just honest. Over the next week, I started noticing more. The way he never talked about family when I asked casual questions, how he avoided certain topics, deflected with vague answers, the scars on his knuckles that looked like fight scars, the tattoo on his neck that I finally recognized from a documentary I'd watched. It was prison ink, the kind you can't get in regular tattoo shops. I Googled prison tattoos at 2 a.m. one night, my hands shaking as I scrolled through images that matched the ink on his arms. Teardrops, numbers, symbols that meant time served, crimes committed, allegiances sworn. Then my ex-boyfriend showed up. Marcus had been texting for weeks, angry messages demanding I answer him, claiming I owed him money, saying I'd ruined his life by leaving. I'd blocked him, changed my number. But somehow he'd found my address. He appeared at my door at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, drunk and pounding so hard I thought he'd break it down. "Open the fucking door, Amy. I know you're in there. You can't just ghost me like I'm nothing." I called the police. They came, took a report, made him leave. Told me to file a restraining order in the morning. He came back the next night. This time, I didn't have to call anyone. Derek appeared like a shadow, stepping between Marcus and my door with the kind of stillness that's more threatening than any aggressive movement. He didn't say a word, just stood there, arms crossed, staring Marcus down with those dark, unreadable eyes. Marcus took one look at this bald, tattooed stranger and stumbled backward. "Who the fuck are you?" "Someone you don't want to know." Derek's voice was so low I barely heard it, but Marcus heard it. And whatever he saw in Derek's face made him turn and run. I stood in my doorway, shaking, watching this stranger who'd somehow become my protector. "Thank you," I whispered. He turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable in his expression. "You deserve better than men who make you afraid in your own home." The next morning, my neighbor knocked on my door. Mrs. Chen from 3B, sweet elderly woman who'd lived here for 20 years. Her face was pale, worried. "Amy, honey," she said, pressing a folded piece of paper into my hand. "Do you know that man who's been watching your building? I Googled him, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this." I unfolded the paper. It was a printed news article. The headline read, "Local man sentenced to 8 years for aggravated assault." And there was Derek's face in a mugshot. Younger, harder, but unmistakably him. My hands started shaking. "What did he do?" I whispered. Mrs. Chen squeezed my arm. "Please be careful. Men like that, they don't change." I sat on my bathroom floor for an hour, staring at that article, reading it over and over until the words blurred together. Derek Matthews, 24, was sentenced to 8 years in state prison for aggravated assault following an incident outside Riley's bar on March 15th. According to police reports, Matthews attacked Brandon Cole with a broken bottle, causing injuries requiring 47 stitches and reconstructive surgery. Witnesses reported the attack was unprovoked and brutal. Matthews showed no remorse during sentencing. 8 years. He'd served 8 years. I found more articles, more details. A younger Derek being led away in handcuffs, his face hard and angry. Victim impact statements describing permanent scarring and trauma. A judge calling him a danger to society. But there were other details, too. Buried deeper. Mentions of Brandon Cole having a history of violence against women. Whispers about Derek's sister being involved somehow. Contradictions in witness statements. It didn't matter. He'd nearly killed someone. He'd gone to prison. He was an ex-convict who'd been following me, watching me, inserting himself into my life. I should have been terrified. Instead, I was confused. Because the man in those articles, angry, violent, remorseless, didn't match the person who'd carefully picked up my apples, who'd fixed my lock, who'd stood between me and Marcus without raising his voice or his fists. That evening, I saw him in his usual spot across from my building. This time, I didn't wave or ignore him. I walked straight up to him. "You were in prison," I said. Not a question, an accusation. He didn't flinch, didn't pretend. Just said, "Yes, for 8 years. Yes, you nearly killed someone." His jaw tightened, but he held my gaze. "Yes." I waited for excuses, justifications, the usual bullshit men give when caught in lies. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting for me to decide what happened next. "Why didn't you tell me?" Would you have let me help you if you knew? No? That's why. The honesty was infuriating. I wanted him to lie, to give me a reason to hate him, to make this simple. Instead, he was just honest. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the steps of my building. Tell me everything. We sat as the sun set, and he told me the truth. His sister, Emily, was 19 when she started dating Brandon Cole. Derek was 24, working construction, trying to save money for community college. Brandon seemed okay at first, charming, successful, older. Then the bruises started. Emily made excuses. Derek noticed. When he confronted her, she begged him not to interfere, said Brandon would change, said she loved him. Then one night, Emily called Derek crying. Brandon had beaten her so badly she couldn't see out of one eye. She was at the hospital. Derek went to find Brandon. I didn't go there to talk, Derek said, his voice flat, emotionless. I went there to hurt him. I wanted him to feel what he'd done to her. I found him at his usual bar, drunk and laughing with his friends, and I lost it. He'd attacked Brandon with a broken bottle. Witnesses pulled him off, but the damage was done. Brandon needed emergency surgery. Derek was arrested at the scene. I pled guilty, Derek continued. Didn't try to justify it or claim self-defense. What I did was wrong. I knew it then. I know it now. I chose violence, and I paid for it. 8 years. 8 years. Out in 6 with good behavior. Been out for 4 months now. 3 years parole remaining. I studied his profile in the fading light. The tattoos, the scars, the careful way he held himself. And your sister? Left him while I was inside. Got married to someone else. Has 2 kids now. She doesn't talk to me anymore. His voice cracked slightly. Says I embarrassed the family. Says I'm the violent one, not him. The bitterness in his voice was real, raw. And I spent 8 years learning that violence doesn't fix anything, he said quietly. It just creates more damage. I can't take back what I did. Can't undo those scars on his face. Can't give back those years. All I can do is be different now. And that's why you're following me, to prove you're different. He finally looked at me. No, I'm watching over you because I know what it looks like when someone's drowning and everyone else is too busy to notice. You carry too much. You work too hard. You live alone in a building with broken locks and burned-out lights. And men like your ex think that makes you easy prey. I watch because nobody else is. And because I know what it's like when nobody cares if you survive. I should have told him to leave. Every reasonable person in my life would say I was crazy. You don't befriend ex-convicts. You don't let violent criminals into your life. But when I looked at him, really looked, I saw someone who'd made a terrible choice and spent 8 years paying for it. Someone who was trying to build something better from the wreckage of his past. I need time to think, I said finally. I understand. He stood up, started to walk away. Derek? He turned back. Thank you for telling me the truth. He nodded and disappeared into the darkness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his sister, about Brandon Cole, about violence and justice and second chances, about the fact that Derek had served his time, followed his parole conditions, and was trying to rebuild his life one careful choice at a time. I was still awake at 3 a.m. when I heard glass shattering outside. I ran to my window. In the parking lot below, Marcus was smashing my car window with a baseball bat, screaming incoherently about respect and consequences. I grabbed my phone, but before I could dial 911, I saw Derek running from across the street, and I realized he was the only person who could actually keep me safe. Derek called the police while I stayed in my apartment, watching through the window as Marcus was arrested for vandalism and violating the restraining order I'd finally filed. Derek stood there as witness, calm and composed, giving his statement with the kind of careful precision that spoke of someone who knew exactly how to interact with law enforcement without giving them any reason to look deeper at his background. When the police left, Derek stayed in the parking lot, leaning against his truck, clearly intending to keep watch for the rest of the night. I made coffee, threw on a jacket, and brought him a cup. You should get some sleep, he said, accepting the coffee. I can't. My adrenaline's through the roof. I sat on the curb next to where he stood. Will you sit with me? Just for a bit? He hesitated, then folded his 6-foot frame down to sit beside me, leaving careful space between us. We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee as the night slowly gave way to dawn. "I need to ask you something," I finally said. "And I need you to be honest. Always am. Why are you really doing this? Watching over me, protecting me. You don't know me. I'm nobody to you." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the broken glass from my car window scattered across the asphalt. "When I got out 4 months ago, my parole officer told me the statistics. 2/3 of released inmates end up back in prison within 3 years. Society doesn't want us to succeed. They just want us gone. Every job application asks about convictions. Every apartment complex runs background checks. Every person who Googles my name sees that mugshot and decides I'm still that angry 24-year-old kid." He turned to look at me. "The first month out, I almost gave up. Almost said fuck it and stopped trying. Then I saw this woman outside a grocery store. She was exhausted, carrying more than she should, and nobody was helping her. Everyone just walked past like she was invisible. And I realized that's what the world did to me too. Made me invisible. Decided I didn't matter. So you decided to help me because we're both invisible. I decided to help you because I could. Because I saw someone who needed help and I was there. And because every time I make a choice to be better than I was, I prove that I'm not that person anymore." He looked down at his scarred hands. "I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm just showing you who I'm trying to become." Something shifted in me then. This wasn't about him saving me. It was about him saving himself. "I want to help you," I said. "With Marcus. With feeling safe. But I need you to set boundaries. What are you willing to do? And what won't you do?" He didn't hesitate. "I won't do anything that violates my parole. I won't touch him, threaten him, or do anything that could send me back to prison. But I'll document everything, testify if needed, make sure you have evidence for restraining orders and police reports. I'll teach you self-defense. I'll make sure your apartment is secure, and I'll watch over you until you don't need me to anymore." That's very specific. I've thought about it a lot. I think about everything a lot now. Every choice has consequences, and I can't afford any more mistakes. Over the next 2 weeks, Derek became part of my routine. He installed better locks on my apartment, including a deadbolt and a chain. He taught me how to be aware of my surroundings, how to identify exits, how to trust my instincts. He drove me to and from work when my car was being repaired. He never asked for anything in return, never made me feel obligated or uncomfortable. I started seeing his life too. The tiny studio apartment he rented above a laundromat, just a mattress on the floor, a small TV, and stacks of books from the public library. His job at a warehouse, loading trucks from 4 a.m. to noon. His weekly meetings with his parole officer, where he had to account for every hour of his time. The way he budgeted every dollar, saving for a future that felt perpetually uncertain. "Don't you have any family?" I asked one afternoon when he was installing a security camera outside my apartment door. His hands paused on the mounting bracket. "My parents died when I was 22. Car accident. Emily was all I had left, and I lost her when I went to prison. She visited once in 8 years. Once. To tell me she never wanted to see me again. I'm sorry. Don't be. I understand why she cut me off. Every time she looks at me, she remembers the worst period of her life. I'm a reminder of her trauma, her bad choices, the violence that marked her. It's easier for her if I don't exist. That's not fair to you." He shrugged. "Fair doesn't matter. What matters is that she's safe and happy. That's enough." I wanted to argue, but I saw the wall go up behind his eyes. The place he went when emotions got too complicated. One evening, we were sitting in his truck outside the diner during my dinner break, eating cheap tacos from the food cart across the street. It was the first time I'd seen him relax even slightly, his shoulders loosening, a hint of a smile when I told him a story about a difficult customer. "You should smile more," I said without thinking. He looked at me, surprised. "Why?" "Because you have a nice smile, and because you deserve moments that make you happy." Something vulnerable flickered across his face. "I'm not sure I remember how to be happy. Prison teaches you to survive, not to live. I'm still learning the difference." I reached over and touched his hand. The first time I'd initiated physical contact. His skin was warm, calloused, scarred. He stared at my hand on his like he couldn't quite believe it was real. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For everything. For seeing me when nobody else did. For making me feel safe. For being honest about who you are. Amy, he stopped, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite express. You're a good person, Derek. Whatever you did 8 years ago, whoever you were then, you're a good person now, and I trust you. He turned his hand over, carefully intertwining his fingers with mine. We sat there in the parking lot, holding hands like teenagers, neither of us quite ready to name what was happening between us. Then his phone rang. The moment shattered. He pulled his hand away, checked the screen, and his entire body went rigid. Who is it? I asked. Someone from my past. His voice had gone flat, emotionless, the tone I recognized as his prison voice. Someone I hoped I'd never see again. He answered the call on speaker. A male voice, rough and familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. Derek Matthews. Heard you got out. Thought I'd look you up, see how you're doing. What do you want, Tony? Want? Nothing. Just checking in. Saw you got yourself a girlfriend. Pretty little thing working at the diner. Amy, right? My blood went cold. Derek's hand tightened on the phone, his knuckles going white. Stay away from her. Relax, brother. I'm not here to cause trouble. Just thought you might want to help an old friend out. I'm in a tight spot. Need someone with your particular skills. One job, good money. What do you say? No. You sure? Would be a shame if something happened to that pretty girlfriend of yours. Accidents happen all the time. Derek's jaw clenched. Touch her, and I will end you. Tony laughed. There's the Derek I remember. See? You're not as reformed as you pretend. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. Derek sat there, staring at the phone, every muscle in his body coiled tight. When he finally looked at me, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Who was that? I whispered. Someone I knew inside. Someone I did favors for to survive. Someone I owe. He ran a hand over his bald head. And someone who's going to destroy everything I've built unless I can figure out how to stop him. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Derek. He insisted on staying outside my building, keeping watch, convinced that Tony was watching both of us. And he was probably right. People like Tony didn't make empty threats. The next morning, Derek told me everything. Tony Marchetti was serving 20 years for armed robbery when Derek arrived at the state prison. He ran protection rackets inside, controlled who got beaten and who got left alone. Derek, as a first-timer with no gang affiliations, was vulnerable. So Derek made a deal. He'd use his construction skills to build hidden compartments in the prison workshop, places where Tony could hide contraband. In exchange, Tony made sure nobody touched him. I had a choice, Derek said, his voice hollow. Get beaten daily, maybe killed, or compromise my morals to survive. I chose survival. I'm not proud of it. When did he get out? He shouldn't be out. He had 15 years left on his sentence. Derek paced my small living room, which means he either escaped or made a deal with prosecutors. Either way, he's dangerous. What kind of job is he trying to recruit you for? Doesn't matter. I'm not doing it. But if I refuse? He stopped, looking at me with anguish in his dark eyes. He'll hurt you to hurt me. That's how people like Tony operate. So what do? We? No. I'm getting you somewhere safe, and then I'm handling this. You're on parole, Derek. If you handle this, you go back to prison. We need to be smart. Over the next 3 days, Tony made his presence known. A note slipped under my apartment door. Tick-tock. My tires slashed at work. Photos of me leaving the diner, texted to Derek's phone. Each incident carefully designed to pressure Derek without giving us anything we could take to the police. Marcus, emboldened by someone's encouragement, almost certainly Tony's, violated his restraining order twice more. The police arrested him each time, but he kept making bail. It was clear someone was pulling strings, creating chaos in my life to leverage Derek. I told my manager at the diner what was happening. She was sympathetic but practical. Honey, I can't afford security guards. If you're bringing this kind of trouble around, maybe you need to take some time off. I told my best friend, Rebecca. She was less sympathetic. Amy, what are you doing? You're dating an ex-con who's attracting more criminals into your life. Get away from him before you end up dead. But I couldn't. Not because I was naive or reckless, but because I saw what nobody else did. Derek was trying desperately to protect me while staying within his parole boundaries. He was documenting everything, reporting to his parole officer, trying to work within the system. He was doing everything right, and it still wasn't enough. Then Tony showed up in person. I was walking home from work when a black SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and a smile that made my skin crawl. Amy, right? I'm Tony, friend of Derek's from the old days. I kept walking. The SUV kept pace. He tell you about me, about the things we did together inside. Derek's got skills, you know, smart hands, loyal, exactly the kind of guy I need for a job I'm planning. He's not interested. See? That's where you're wrong. He will be interested, once he understands the situation. Tony's smile widened. Here's what's going to happen. Derek's going to help me with one job, just one, and in exchange, I'll leave both of you alone forever. But if he refuses... He held up his phone, showing me a photo. It was my apartment building. And in the photo, carefully circled, was my window. Accidents happen, sweetheart. Fires, break-ins. Sometimes people get hurt real bad. Would be a shame if Derek had to live with that guilt on top of everything else he's carrying. I stopped walking and looked directly at Tony. I'm recording this conversation. And if anything happens to me, the police will know exactly who to investigate. It was a bluff. I wasn't recording anything. But Tony's smile faltered slightly. Smart girl. I like that. But here's the thing. I've been real careful not to threaten you directly. All I did was have a conversation, make some observations. No jury in the world would convict me based on that. He gestured around the empty street. And right now, it's just you and me. No witnesses. No proof, just a friendly chat. The SUV drove away, leaving me shaking on the sidewalk. When I told Derek, he punched the wall of his apartment so hard he put a hole in the drywall. Then he sat on the floor, cradling his bleeding knuckles, and said, I'm leaving. Tonight, I'll disappear. Go to a different state. Start over. If I'm gone, he has no leverage. And you'll violate your parole. You'll go back to prison. Better me in prison than you hurt because of me. No. I sat down beside him. No running. We're smarter than him. We can beat him without you violating parole. How? I thought about it. What kind of job is he planning? Derek was quiet for a moment. Knowing Tony? Something involving forced entry and security systems? That's why he wants me. My construction background. My knowledge of how buildings are put together. So he's planning a robbery. Probably. Then we go to the police. Tell them everything. Let them handle it. With what evidence? He's been careful not to directly threaten us with witnesses present. It's all implications and intimidation. The police won't take it seriously until after something happens. He was right. I'd learned enough about the system to know that implied threats and vague warnings weren't enough for intervention. Then we get evidence, I said. We make him expose himself. Amy, no, this isn't your fight. Yes, it is. He made it my fight when he threatened me to control you. I took his damaged hand in mine, carefully examining his split knuckles. We're in this together. You've been protecting me for weeks. Let me help protect you. He looked at me with something like awe. You're not afraid of him. I'm terrified. But I'm more afraid of losing you to prison or watching you sacrifice yourself to save me. I met his eyes. You showed me that second chances matter, that people can change. Now let me show you that you don't have to fight alone anymore. For the first time since Tony's call, Derek smiled. A real smile. Small and fragile, but genuine. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. We spent the next 2 days planning. Derek reached out to his parole officer and explained the situation, documenting everything while staying within legal boundaries. I talked to a lawyer through a free legal aid clinic, learning what evidence we'd need. We set up hidden cameras outside my apartment. We documented every instance of harassment, and then we waited for Tony to make his move. He didn't disappoint. 3 days later, Tony called Derek with details. A jewelry warehouse on the edge of town. Poor security, valuable inventory, a guard who'd been bribed to look the other way. Tony needed Derek to bypass the building's alarm system and create an exit route. Derek agreed to meet him, and I insisted on going with him. Absolutely not, Derek said. He knows your weakness is me. If I'm there, he'll feel confident, in control. He'll let things slip, and I'll be recording everything. It's too dangerous. Staying home alone while Tony knows I'm unprotected is more dangerous. At least with you, I have a chance. We argued for an hour. Finally, Derek gave in. but only with conditions. I'd stay in the truck, doors locked, engine running. At the first sign of trouble, I'd drive away and call the police. I agreed, even though I had no intention of abandoning him. The meeting was set for the abandoned industrial district at midnight. As we drove there in Derek's truck, I could feel the tension radiating off him. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. "If this goes wrong," he started. "It won't. If it does, I need you to know something." He glanced at me briefly, then back at the road. "These past few weeks with you have been the best weeks of my life. For the first time since prison, I've felt like a human being again, like I matter to someone, like I'm worth saving." "Derek, let me finish. You believed in me when nobody else did. You saw past the tattoos and the criminal record to the person I'm trying to be. Whatever happens tonight, thank you for that. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay clean, to fight for something better." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We're going to get through this. Together." He parked in the shadows near the meeting point. Tony's SUV was already there, along with 2 other vehicles I didn't recognize. "3 cars," Derek muttered. He brought backup. This is worse than I thought. My phone was recording in my pocket. Derek's was recording in his jacket. We had pepper spray and a plan to get evidence of Tony's criminal intent. What we didn't have was a guarantee that we'd survive the night. Derek looked at me one more time. "Stay in the truck. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay here and drive away if things go bad. Promise me." "I promise," I lied. He kissed my forehead, brief, gentle, desperate, and got out of the truck. I watched him walk toward Tony's SUV. This man I'd let into my life just weeks ago. This ex-convict who was risking everything to protect me. And I knew, in that moment, that I'd fallen in love with him. Derek walked toward Tony's SUV with his hands visible, moving slowly, carefully, the body language of someone who knew exactly how dangerous this situation was. I watched from the truck, my phone recording, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Tony got out, flanked by 2 other men, big guys, the kind hired for muscle rather than brains. They patted Derek down roughly, finding his phone immediately. "Really, Derek?" Tony laughed, holding up the phone. "You think I'm stupid? Who are you recording for?" "The cops. Your parole officer." He smashed the phone on the ground, grinding it under his heel. I kept my own phone recording from the truck, praying the audio would be clear enough. "I'm not doing your job, Tony," Derek said, his voice steady despite being outnumbered 3-1. "I came here to tell you face to face, I'm done with that life. Find someone else." Tony's smile disappeared. "You think you get to say no to me? After everything I did for you inside? I kept you alive, Derek. You'd have been shanked in your first month without my protection. You owe me." "I paid that debt already. I built your compartments. I kept my mouth shut. I did what you asked. My debt is done. Your debt is done when I say it's done." Tony stepped closer, jabbing a finger into Derek's chest. "Here's how this works. You help me with this job, or I make sure your girlfriend regrets you ever looked at her. You know what I can do. You know I don't make empty threats. Touch her and I'll kill you." Derek's voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of someone making a promise, not a threat. Tony laughed. "There it is, the real Derek, the violent thug pretending to be reformed. You can't help yourself, can you? The moment someone pushes you, you're right back to being that angry kid who nearly killed a man over some bitch." I saw Derek's hands clench into fists, saw the tension in his shoulders. For a moment, I thought he was going to attack Tony, throw away everything he'd worked for, prove everyone right about ex-cons and second chances being a lie. Then he breathed out slowly and unclenched his fists. "No," he said quietly. "You don't get to drag me back to who I was. I'm not that person anymore. Then your girlfriend pays the price. Then you'll be the first person the police investigate. I've documented everything, every threat, every instance of harassment. My parole officer knows about you. I've created a paper trail that leads straight to you. If anything happens to Amy, you won't just be suspected. You'll be convicted." Tony's eyes narrowed. "Bluffing. Try me." They stared at each other, a battle of wills playing out in the shadows of the industrial district. Finally, Tony stepped back. "You've got 48 hours, he said. 48 hours to change your mind." After that, I stopped asking nicely. He gestured to his men, and they got back in their vehicles. But before driving away, Tony walked over to Derek's truck. I ducked down, but not fast enough. He tapped on the window. I slowly sat up, making sure my phone was still recording in my pocket. "Smart girl," Tony said through the glass. "Recording everything. Building a case. I admire that. But here's what you need to understand. The system doesn't protect people like you from people like me. I've got lawyers, I've got connections, I've got patience. So ask yourself, is Derek really worth dying for?" He didn't wait for an answer. Just walked back to his SUV and drove away, leaving us alone in the darkness. Derek got back in the truck, his hands shaking. "Did you get it? The recording?" "I got everything." "Good. We're taking it to the police first thing in the morning." But morning brought consequences we hadn't anticipated. Derek's parole officer showed up at his apartment at 7 a.m. with a warrant for a random inspection, the kind that wasn't random at all. Someone had tipped her off that Derek was associating with known criminals. The inspection turned up nothing illegal, but the officer was skeptical. "I'm disappointed in you, Matthews," she said, reviewing her paperwork. "You've been doing so well. Don't throw it all away by getting involved with your old crowd." "I'm not involved with them. They're threatening me and my girlfriend. I'm trying to handle it legally." "Then file a police report." I did. "This morning." She looked surprised. "Show me." We went to the police station together. Detective Sarah Chen, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, listened to our story and reviewed the recordings. Her expression grew more serious as she listened to Tony's threats. "This is good," she said finally. "Clear intent, direct threats, implied violence. I can bring him in for questioning." "Will it be enough to arrest him?" I asked. "Maybe, depends on his lawyer. These kinds of cases are tricky. It's all implication and intimidation. He never says explicitly what he'll do or confirms he's planning a crime. A good lawyer could argue he was just talking hypothetically." My heart sank. "So we risked everything for nothing." I didn't say that. "We can put pressure on him, make him know we're watching. Sometimes that's enough to make criminals move on to easier targets. And sometimes it just makes them more careful," Derek said quietly. Detective Chen nodded. "Yeah, sometimes that." She brought Tony in for questioning that afternoon. He came with 2 lawyers and walked out 3 hours later, smiling. That night, my apartment building caught fire. Not my apartment specifically. That would have been too obvious. The fire started in the basement, in the laundry room, spreading quickly through the old building's wooden infrastructure. The smoke alarms woke me at 2 a.m. Derek, who'd been sleeping in his truck outside, was already pounding on doors, waking neighbors, helping people evacuate. We stood in the parking lot, wrapped in blankets provided by the Red Cross, watching firefighters battle the blaze. Mrs. Chen from 3B was crying. Families with young children were being loaded into ambulances for smoke inhalation treatment. "He did this," I said to Derek. "Tony did this." "Can't prove it. Fire inspector will probably rule it accidental. Faulty wiring. Old building." Derek's voice was hollow. "He's sending a message. I can hurt you anytime I want, and you can't stop me." The building was uninhabitable. Everyone was displaced. I had nowhere to go, no renter's insurance, barely any savings. "You can stay at my place," Derek said immediately. "It's small, but it's safe, and I'll sleep in my truck if it makes you more comfortable." "This is my fault," I said, tears streaming down my face. "All these people lost their homes because of me. No, because of Tony, because of me and my past." Derek's hands clenched. "I should have left town when he first contacted me. I should have protected you by disappearing." "Stop. This isn't your fault either. Tony's responsible for his actions, not you." But I could see the guilt crushing Derek. He'd spent 8 years paying for one violent choice, and now his past was destroying innocent lives again. Detective Chen showed up at dawn, surveying the damage. The fire inspector was with her, discussing preliminary findings. "Looks like arson," the inspector said. "Accelerant used in multiple locations. Professional job." "Tony," I said. Detective Chen looked sympathetic but frustrated. "Without physical evidence linking him to the scene, we can't make an arrest. He's smart. He didn't do it himself, and whoever he hired won't talk." "So he just gets away with it?" Derek's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "For now. But keep documenting everything. Eventually, criminals make mistakes. We left the station feeling defeated. Derek drove me to his tiny studio apartment, truly tiny, barely 300 square feet, with just enough room for a mattress, a small table, and a camping chair. He'd been living like a monk, spending nothing, saving everything, trying to build a foundation for a better life. "I'll take the truck," he said, grabbing a blanket. "You take the bed. Derek, this is your home. We can share. I trust you." He looked at me like I'd just offered him the world. "You shouldn't. Everyone in your life is telling you to run from me, and they're right. I'm poison. Everything I touch gets destroyed." "That's not true. Amy, your building burned down because of me. Your neighbors are homeless because of me. You've lost everything because you chose to stand by an ex-con instead of walking away like any smart person would." "I lost things. I didn't lose everything." I stepped closer to him. "I chose you because you're worth choosing. Because when everyone else walked past me like I was invisible, you saw me. Because you've spent weeks protecting me, asking nothing in return, trying so hard to be better than your past. And look where it got you. It got me here, with someone who cares, someone who's honest, someone who fights for what's right, even when it's hard." I took his scarred hands in mine. "We'll figure this out together. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, but you've got me anyway." He pulled me into his arms then, holding me like I was something precious he was afraid to break. We stood there in that tiny apartment, two people who'd been invisible to the world until we found each other, and I felt safer than I had in weeks. "I love you," I whispered against his chest. He tensed, his arms tightening around me. "Amy, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And that terrifies me, because loving you means I have something to lose again. And I can't lose you." We spent the night in his apartment, sleeping beside each other on that mattress on the floor, holding hands in the darkness like anchors keeping each other grounded. The next morning, Tony called. "Heard about the fire," he said cheerfully. "Terrible accident. Could have been much worse, though." "Next time, it might be." Derek's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" "Same thing I've always wanted. One job, Derek. Help me with one job, and this all goes away. I disappear from your life forever. You have my word. Your word means nothing. Then how about this? Help me and I'll confess to the fire. Give you evidence you can take to the police. Clear your conscience about all those displaced people. You get justice and I get my job done. Everyone wins." It was a trap. Obviously a trap. But Derek was drowning in guilt over the fire, over the neighbors who'd lost everything, over the way his past kept destroying innocent lives. "I'll think about it," Derek said and hung up. "No," I said immediately. "You can't trust him. The moment you help him commit a crime, you violate your parole and go back to prison. That's what he wants, to force you back into that life. And if I don't, he keeps escalating. Next time, it won't be an empty building. Next time, people might die. Then we find another way." "There is no other way." Derek stood up, pacing the tiny apartment like a caged animal. "I've tried doing everything right. Documented everything, followed every rule, stayed clean. And it doesn't matter because my past won't let me go. Maybe I should just accept that some people don't get second chances." "No, I won't let you give up. It's not your choice." "Yes, it is, because I'm in this now. Tony made me part of this when he threatened me, burned my home, tried to use me against you. So we fight back together, or we lose together. Your choice." He stopped pacing and looked at me with something like wonder. "Why? Why do you care so much?" "Because you're worth saving. And because someone needs to show you that redemption isn't a lie." I couldn't sleep that night. Derek eventually dozed off on the mattress beside me, his breathing deep and even despite the chaos of our lives. I lay there in the darkness, thinking about Tony, about the fire, about all the ways this could end badly. Then it hit me. We were playing defense when we needed to be playing offense. Tony had all the power because he was patient, careful, and willing to escalate gradually. We were always reacting, always one step behind. But what if we stopped reacting and started controlling the situation? At dawn, I slipped out of the apartment and went to the library. I spent 3 hours researching Tony Marchetti, his arrest record, his known associates, his patterns. Then I did something risky. I called his number. Well, well, Tony answered. On the girlfriend? Calling to beg for mercy? Calling to make a deal? He laughed. You don't have anything I want, sweetheart. I have Derek. You want him for a job. I'll convince him to do it on one condition. You give me collateral first, proof of your plans, evidence I can take to the police if anything happens to us, insurance. Why would I do that? Because Derek won't help you without my permission. He loves me, which means I have leverage over him that you don't. You can threaten me all you want, but that just makes him more stubborn. Give me insurance, and I'll convince him this is the best way to protect everyone. There was a long silence. You're smarter than you look. So we have a deal. Maybe. What kind of proof do you want? Text messages detailing your plans, names of your accomplices, location of the job. Enough that if you betray us, I can send it all to Detective Chen. And what stops you from sending it to her immediately after I give it to you? Derek, if I turn you in before the job, you've still got time to hurt us from inside a holding cell. Your connections, your lawyer, your friends on the outside. But if Derek helps you with the job and you keep your word to leave us alone, then we all walk away clean. I keep the evidence as insurance. Nothing more. Another long silence. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm protecting the man I love. That's not a game. He hung up without answering. When I got back to the apartment, Derek was awake and furious. Where were you? I woke up and you were gone. No note. Phone off. I called Tony. His face went pale. You what? I explained my plan. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Amy, that's insane. You're asking a career criminal to give you evidence against himself. Why would he ever? Because he's arrogant. Because he thinks he's smarter than both of us. Because he believes that once you help him with this job, he owns you forever. He'll give me evidence thinking it doesn't matter, because he'll never plan to honor his end of the deal anyway. Exactly, which means you're walking into a trap with no guarantee of safety. No, I'm creating leverage. Right now, he holds all the cards. This way, we get something concrete, evidence we can actually use. And when he double-crosses us, then we have proof of his criminal intent, his accomplices, everything Detective Chen needs for a real case. We turn it over and let the system handle him. Derek ran his hands over his bald head, the gesture of a man barely holding himself together. This could get you killed. Doing nothing could get both of us killed. At least this way, we're fighting back. He wanted to argue more, but his phone buzzed. A text from Tony. Deal. Meet me tonight. Come alone. He's agreeing, I said. That means it's working. Or it's a trap. Probably both. That evening, I went to meet Tony alone, despite Derek's protests. The meeting location was a coffee shop in a busy shopping district. Tony's concession to not terrifying me completely. He sat in the back corner, looking relaxed and confident. You've got guts, he said as I sat down. I respect that. I don't want your respect. I want your guarantee that you'll leave us alone after this job. I'm a man of my word. Then prove it. Show me the evidence. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a detailed text conversation between him and someone named Marcus discussing the jewelry warehouse job. Location, security details, guard schedules, planned routes. There were photos of the building, blueprints, even financial projections of the hall. Your ex-boyfriend's been helpful, Tony said, smiling at my shocked expression. Turns out he knows someone who works security there, been feeding me information for weeks. Marcus. Of course. He'd been Tony's accomplice all along, helping with the harassment, probably even the fire. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because I want you to understand something. I always win. Your ex thought he could use me to get revenge on you and Derek. Instead, I used him. After this job, he's going to prison for conspiracy, and I'll be long gone with the money. Everyone's a pawn, sweetheart. The only question is whether you're smart enough to be a pawn who survives. He took his phone back. Here's what happens next. Derek helps me with the job tomorrow night. He disables the alarm system, creates our exit route, keeps watch. We get in, we get out. Nobody gets hurt. Then I disappear from your lives forever. And if Derek gets caught, then he takes the fall. That's the risk ex-cons take when they break the law. But if he's smart and follows my instructions, nobody needs to know he was involved. Send me those text messages. Insurance. No. You get nothing until after the job is done. That's my insurance that you won't run to the cops immediately. I'd expected this. Then Derek doesn't participate. We stared at each other across the coffee shop table, two people playing chess with lives as pieces. Finally, Tony smiled. Fine, I'll send you partial information. Enough to implicate me and Marcus, but not enough to stop the job. After it's done, you get the rest. Deal. I hated it, but it was better than nothing. Deal. He forwarded me several texts, just enough to prove Marcus was involved and that Tony was planning something illegal, not enough to specify when or where. As I stood to leave, Tony grabbed my wrist. One more thing. Double-cross me, and I don't just hurt Derek. I hurt you in ways that'll make you wish you'd died in that fire. Understand? Yes. His grip tightened. Say it. I understand. He released me, and I walked out of the coffee shop on shaking legs. Derek was waiting outside in his truck, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Did he hurt you? No, but I got evidence. I showed him the texts. He read them, his expression darkening. Marcus is working with him. Yes, which means we can use that. Marcus has a record. He violated his restraining order multiple times. He's got motive. If we can prove he's involved in this robbery, it strengthens our case and gets him out of your life permanently. That, too. We drove back to his apartment in silence. That night, lying beside him in the darkness, I told him my real plan. I'm going to the job site tomorrow, I said quietly. Before the robbery, I'm going to plant cameras, gather my own evidence. Then, when Tony and Marcus think everything's going according to plan, we have an insurance policy. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. But we can't trust Tony to keep his word. And we can't trust the police to protect us without solid evidence. This is the only way. Amy, I'm doing this with or without your permission. I'd prefer to do it with you, but I'll go alone if I have to. He pulled me closer, his voice tight with fear and frustration. You're the bravest person I've ever met, and that terrifies me. We've come too far to give up now. The next day, while Derek was at work, I went to the jewelry warehouse. I wore a generic uniform shirt I'd bought at Goodwill and carried a clipboard, playing the role of a safety inspector. Security waved me through without question. People rarely stop someone who looks official and acts confident. I planted 3 small cameras with remote access, one near the alarm system, one covering the back entrance, one monitoring the main showroom. Cheap equipment from an electronics store, paid for with the last money in my checking account, but hopefully good enough to capture what we needed. That evening, Derek received final instructions from Tony. Midnight, wear dark clothes, bring tools. I can still back out, Derek said, holding me close in his tiny apartment. We can disappear tonight, leave town, start over somewhere new, and live looking over our shoulders forever? No, we end this tonight. At 11:30 p.m., Derek left to meet Tony. I stayed behind, monitoring the cameras from a laptop, my phone ready to call 911 the moment I had undeniable evidence of the crime in progress. The cameras showed Tony, Marcus, and 2 other men arriving at the warehouse. Derek was with them, looking sick with guilt and fear. I watched as Tony directed everyone into position, as Derek disabled the alarm system exactly as instructed, as Marcus used his security access code to open the doors. They were inside. They were actually doing it. And I had it all on camera. But something was wrong. Tony kept looking around, kept checking corners, like he was expecting something. Then he smiled directly at one of my hidden cameras. He knew. Somehow, he knew I was watching. Tony pulled out his phone and called me. I answered, my hands shaking. Clever girl? He said. But not clever enough? You think I didn't check for cameras? You think I didn't prepare for your little betrayal? On screen, I watched as he gestured to one of his men, who pulled out a gun and pointed it at Derek's head. Here's what happens next, Tony continued. You delete that footage right now, or I put a bullet in your boyfriend's head and leave him here for the cops to find. An ex-con found dead at a robbery scene. Won't be hard to sell the narrative that he was the mastermind and things went wrong. Don't do this, I begged. Delete the footage. My finger hovered over the delete button. Everything we'd worked for, all the evidence, gone in one click. But then I saw something on the other camera feed. Detective Chen and 3 uniformed officers entering through the front entrance, weapons drawn. Tony had one plan, but I'd had 2. While I was planting cameras, I'd also left an anonymous tip with the police about Marcus's involvement, about his security access, about suspicious activity planned for tonight. I'd gambled that they'd conduct surveillance, that they'd see the team entering, that they'd have probable cause to intervene. And I'd been right. Police! Nobody move! Detective Chen's voice echoed through the warehouse. Tony's face went from confident to furious in seconds. He grabbed Derek, using him as a shield. Everyone stay back or he dies. I was already running, leaving the laptop behind, sprinting toward the warehouse. I didn't have a plan, didn't have a weapon. I just knew Derek was in danger and I couldn't sit in safety while he risked everything. I burst through the warehouse door screaming, "Stop! Don't shoot! He's innocent!" Everyone froze. Tony, his men, the police, Derek, all staring at this wild-eyed woman who'd just run into the middle of a police standoff. "Amy, get out of here!" Derek shouted. "He's not one of them!" I screamed at Detective Chen. "Derek Matthews is here under duress. Tony Marchetti has been threatening both of us for weeks. This is a setup." "She's lying," Tony shouted. "Matthews is a violent ex-con. He's part of my crew." "Then why do I have recordings of you threatening him?" I held up my phone. "Why do I have proof that you've been blackmailing him, using me as leverage, forcing him to participate against his will?" Detective Chen's eyes narrowed. "Lower your weapon, Marchetti. Not until I walk out of here." "That's not happening." Everything moved fast then. Tony's grip on Derek shifted for just a second. Derek, trained by 8 years of prison survival, reacted instantly, dropping his weight, spinning, using Tony's own momentum against him. The gun clattered away. Police swarmed in, taking down Tony and his accomplices. Marcus tried to run. He made it 3 steps before I stuck out my foot, tripping him. He went down hard, and a uniformed officer was on him in seconds. "That's from my car window," I said. Derek stood there in the middle of the chaos, hands raised, waiting to see if he'd be arrested alongside the others. Detective Chen approached him carefully. "Matthews, you're going to need to come to the station and give a full statement." "I understand. And we'll need to review whether you violated your parole by participating in this." "I understand that too." She looked at me. "You took a hell of a risk." "He's worth it." The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. Derek was held at the police station while they investigated his role, whether he'd participated willingly or under duress. I refused to leave that waiting room, giving statement after statement, showing them every recording, every text, every piece of evidence of Tony's threats. Finally, Detective Chen emerged. "Matthews is being released. After reviewing everything, we've determined he was acting under duress. He's not being charged." I collapsed in tears of relief. Tony wasn't so lucky. He was charged with attempted armed robbery, arson, witness intimidation, and blackmail. 20 years in prison. Marcus got 5 years as an accomplice. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was something. When Derek walked out of that station, exhausted and hollowed out, I ran to him. "It's over," I whispered. "It's finally over." He held me so tight I could barely breathe. "I thought I'd lost you when you ran into that warehouse. I wasn't going to let him hurt you." We protected each other. Good things came slowly after that. The local news covered our story, not sensationally, but as a story about second chances and redemption. Derek's parole officer recommended early release from supervision. His warehouse promoted him to supervisor. A nonprofit offered him better housing at a subsidized rate. I moved in with him 3 months later. We built a life together, piece by piece. Derek enrolled in community college for social work, wanting to help other former inmates. I got a better job managing a cafe. We adopted a 3-legged cat nobody else wanted. Derek named him Lucky. 6 months after Tony's arrest, Derek's sister finally responded to his text. "Maybe we could talk sometime." He cried showing me that message, years of grief and hope finally breaking through. One evening a year after we'd met, we sat on our balcony watching the sunset. Derek took my hands in his scarred ones. "When I got out of prison, I was planning to kill myself," he said quietly. "Nobody would hire me, nobody would rent to me. Then I saw you in that grocery store. exhausted and overwhelmed. And for the first time in months, I felt like I mattered. You saved me, Amy. Every day after that, you gave me a reason to keep fighting. He pulled out a small box with a simple silver ring. I can't promise you a perfect life or that people won't judge you for being with an ex-con, but I promise I'll spend every day being worthy of your faith in me. Will you marry me? Yes, I said through tears. Yes. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony with the people who'd stood by us. During his vows, Derek said, Amy taught me that redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about building something better from the pieces. 5 years later, we're still building. Derek completed his degree and works with a reentry program, speaking at schools about second chances. I opened my own cafe that hires people with criminal records. We have a house, 3 rescue cats, and we're talking about kids. Last week, after one of Derek's talks, a young woman approached him crying. My brother just got out of prison. I'm afraid he'll end up back inside. Derek gave her our contact. Tell him to call me. Nobody should navigate this alone. Tell him redemption is possible if someone believes in you. That night in bed, I asked, do you ever regret meeting me that day? He pulled me closer. Never. You saw me as human. You believed I was worth saving. You did the same for me. We fell asleep holding hands, 2 people who'd been invisible until we found each other. I chose to let a stranger carry my bags home that November evening. Everyone said it was reckless, but it was the best decision I ever made. Because sometimes the people society writes off are exactly the ones worth fighting for. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, and click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.